Hi, my name's Ayesha and welcome to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be elaborating a little bit more on shared ownership. I do have a video on my channel that talks about all of the different ways that you could potentially buy a property, which I'll link above, but I had a question on my channel that asks specifically about shared ownership. So in today's video I'm going to focus on that and just go into a little bit more detail. So the process of buying a home on shared ownership is very similar to the process of just buying a home normally. So you're still going to need your deposit, which is going to be at least 5%. You are still going to need to get a solicitor, you're still going to need to get a mortgage, maybe, and go through that whole entire process. So it's very similar in that way. What's different about shared ownership is that you only own a part of the building and not all of it. So you can have a minimum share of 25% in that property, and you won't actually own that property until you own the whole 100%, either outright by just paying cash for it or with your deposit together with your mortgage. Until you own it 100%, it's not considered yours at all. So in today's video, I'm actually going to use a proper example for you to illustrate how shared ownership works. This one-bedroom apartment is currently on sale in East London for £350,000. So you can buy a 25% share in this property for £87,500. So instead of having to find 5% on that whole £350,000, you would only have to find a 5% deposit on that £87,500. So that works out to be £4,375, which I'm sure we can all agree that is a low amount to be able to put down on a property. So your mortgage would make up the rest of that 25% share, so you would need to go to the bank and get a mortgage for £83,125. Assuming that this mortgage was paid over 25 years at 2% interest, the monthly payment that you would expect to make on this share of the property would be £353 per month. The housing association who are in charge of that development would own the other 75% of this building, which would be the £262,500 that's left over. You would need to pay rent on that amount that they own, and that's usually at around 3%. For this particular property, the amount that you would have to pay in rent per month is £706. So the total amount that you would pay per month would be that £353 for your mortgage payment, and that's £706 for your rent to the housing association, and together that ends up being £1,059, which I don't know what you think, but I think that's quite a lot of money to pay for a property that's one bedroom for a month. For someone it might be that £1,000 per month is worth it to live in that particular area because maybe it's close to work or maybe it's close to a station or whatever the reason might be. So everyone has their own reasons as to why they might buy in certain areas or why they might make certain financial decisions, and so someone going for this property would have to weigh up that £1,000 versus what they're going to get out of it to know whether it's a good deal. This property also has an annual service charge of £111, which works out being something really low, which is £9.25 per month. So that's not too bad. I don't know what the ground rent is on this property because it doesn't say, but ground rent is usually pretty minimal, so that's not too bad. So when you're going through the process of buying a property on shared ownership, it's the same thing with the banks where they're going to look at your affordability. So you are going to have to be able to prove that you can afford that £1,059 per month. So they're going to look at how much you're going to pay in the rent and the mortgage and how much you're going to need left over. If the amount that you have left over from your paycheck isn't going to be enough to cover all of those sort of day-to-day living expenses, then they're not going to approve you for this property because you're going to be spending too much money. So you have to be very careful. Like, it seems like a very low amount, like £4,000 for a deposit is amazing, but can you afford it in terms of your salary? So that's a very important consideration to think about before you go into shared ownership. I think some housing associations actually prioritise people that are key workers maybe, or they are currently housing association tenants, or people that are living in the borough as well. So if you're looking at something and you're out of borough or you don't fall into some of their groups, you might find that you can get on the waiting list, but you might not actually qualify in the end to be able to get a property with them. So I think that there's a few hoops that you might need to jump through to eventually get to be able to own a shared ownership property. Okay, so you don't have to have just 25% forever. If you really love the property and you want to stay longer, or you want to keep it as your forever home, or you just want to own it outright because that's your ultimate goal, to be able to own a property, then you can do something called staircasing, and that's when you buy additional shares bit by bit to be able to get 100% of that property. I think you can only staircase 3 times though, so you need to be very careful about the amounts that you're putting in each time. So if you start off on 25%, then you might want to do 25, 25 and 25 to get to 100%. Or it could be that you start off at 30% and then maybe you buy another 30%, which is 60%, and then you do 20 and 20 to cover that last 40. So however you do it, it doesn't have to be specifically 25%, I don't think, but you can usually only staircase 3 times. So you have to get your finances in order to make sure that you've got enough to cover those additional payments so that you can get to that 100%. So if you want additional shares, each time you staircase, you're going to have to find that 5% deposit for the share that you want, and then whatever your deposit doesn't cover, you're going to have to go back to your lender and say, I need additional money to be able to buy this additional share. So you have to qualify for it again. If you haven't gone up in wages or anything like that, it might be difficult to staircase, or if you haven't managed to save enough money, then you're not going to be able to do it. So each time the process sort of continues. And the thing as well is that you are going to have to get a valuation done on that property. You're going to have to get your solicitors again. So there's lots of fees associated with it each time you want to staircase. So I think that the best thing to do would be to do it as little as possible, because you don't want to be paying for lots of solicitors fees, you don't want to be paying for lots of valuation fees and so on. It can get pretty expensive in the long run. Okay, so with everything there are pros and cons, and the obvious pro in this situation for shared ownership is that you get to get on the property ladder kind of with a small deposit and a small mortgage. And remember what I said about the banks timesing your wage by 4.5% if you're under £30,000, and if you're earning more than £30,000, they'll times it by 5. So it might be that you can afford a share, but remember affordability comes into it as well, so it might be that you can't afford the rental payments plus your mortgage. Okay, so I think that another advantage, and remember I'm not like a mortgage advisor or a financial advisor or anything, but you could potentially look at shared ownership as some kind of form of property investing, because you put a little bit of money into it, and even if you just kept that 25% share, if property prices rise and you sold your share, you'd get extra money back, but I don't know whether the money you'd get would justify the amount of money that you're spending per month on your rent plus your mortgage. So I'm not sure about the overall return on investment. Maybe after a significant amount of time it might be more worthwhile, but I don't know. But I think that it's good to staircase as soon as you possibly can if you're going to get shared ownership. Okay, so the disadvantages then is the main thing is that you don't actually own that property at all until you get that 100%. Even though you have 25%, you don't actually own that 25% or that 50% or that 60%, whatever share you've got. It's only like hypothetical until you get to 100%. And so you don't have as much rights as maybe like a normal house buyer would, in the sense that you can't just do what you want, you have to get permission from the housing association. So if you breach your agreement with them, so for example, if you lost your job or something and you couldn't pay your rent, they can just kick you out and they don't owe you anything, they can just literally kick you out. Or it could be something like maybe you have a 2-bed on shared ownership and you think that you want to rent out that second bedroom so that you can get extra money to help pay the mortgage. On some shared ownership properties that may not be allowed, it depends on the terms and conditions, and if it's not allowed and you do it and they find out, again they can just kick you out and they don't owe you anything. So it's dangerous in that way, but if you're going to be the perfect tenant and you're going to follow all the rules, then I don't see that being an issue for you. So as I mentioned before, you would need to calculate properly to see whether you're going to get a good return on the money that you've invested in this house, because you're paying a lot out in comparison to your small amount of money that you've put in. Another little thing is that not all lenders will give you a mortgage on a shared ownership property, so you'd have to search around to find one that will. That's not much of an issue. People have shared ownership all the time. It just means that someone who's buying a property normally, not on shared ownership, would have more access to more mortgage products than you would on shared ownership. So another disadvantage with shared ownership is that if you only have a share in a property, when you come to sell that share, if you don't want to live there anymore, you've moved on, you don't want it, you can only sell it to someone who can qualify for shared ownership, which means that you're missing a large chunk of like normal buyers who can't even look at your property in terms of buying it because it's not suitable for them, because they don't qualify for shared ownership or they don't want shared ownership. Also, the housing association will have first refusal to buy your property. So that remains the same whether you only have a 25% share or you own the whole 100% of it. You have to give the housing association the first option to buy it. I'm not sure if that's really a disadvantage, because I'd like to think that they would pay market value for your property when you're selling it if they wanted to buy it. But the problem is that when you're selling it, they have to manage the sale, and you sometimes have to use their companies as well. So you have to use their company, their recommended company, for valuation, which means that, are they going to value it properly? I don't know. So yeah, it's a little bit dodgy. It just seems like everything is in-house, so you have to use their companies for a lot of things most of the times. There are some housing associations that are a little bit relaxed and you can just sell it however you want, but you might get caught in that sense that you have to use all of their companies. So I hope that this video has given you a little bit more information on shared ownership. I'm not personally a fan of it, but I've tried to give you like factual information here so that you can have something that you can use to go and research and find out whether it's a good option for you. When you do your research into shared ownership, you're going to find people who've been through that process who are really positive about it and they've managed to get 100% of that property, and then you're going to find other people who are quite negative about it. So you just have to weigh up everything and make that decision for yourself. I will say that I don't personally know anyone that's gone through the entire process of shared ownership through to selling their home to someone else. I've known two previous colleagues who, one of them was on shared ownership and she bought a share initially and then she managed to own 100% of it, and then the other colleague had 25% and then she managed to staircase up to 50%. It seemed quite stressful for her, that whole process of having to find all the money for the fees and things like that. But other than that, I don't really know too much about it, other than the fact that when I tried to look into it, I didn't really know much about it years ago when I was thinking about getting a property. My wage wasn't enough and I couldn't afford those monthly payments of the rent combined with the mortgage, so it wasn't an option for me and I've never looked into it since. If you've liked this video, then please give it a thumbs up, especially if you've learned something new. It's helpful for me to be able to see if people are actually getting something from the content that I'm providing. And if you haven't subscribed, then please hit that red button and subscribe and help join the family, and you'll be able to get all of the future content that I post. I've got lots of things planned that will hopefully help you all out on your property buying journey, and hopefully I'll have more renovation based things and DIYs and things like that for you as well, so you can stay tuned for that. In the meantime, you take care of yourself and I will see you in the next video.